Kirk Cousins is dealing. We'll talk about 3 safety formations, and maybe we'll get into how babies are made. It's Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today's Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions, so you can send me questions whenever you want at those Twitter accounts. You can also send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. Fill out the Google form in the show notes if you want. You can subscribe to me on Patreon. Send me a message there, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. However, leave a YouTube comment if you're watching on YouTube. I'll see the question there as well. So let's get into this mailbag. The first one we're going to today is from Joel, who asks, based on live tweets from multiple reporters, it sounds like Kirk had a really good day. What's your take on the offense, and is it as explosive as it sounds on Twitter? So, yes, holy crap, that's got to be the headline of the day on Monday's training camp, that everybody was like raving about Kirk Cousins. It seems like he was doing well. He had a good 2-minute drill. Seems like he's been dealing this whole camp, but today seems like it was the best day of a lot of good days. Great stuff. To the actual question, like, is it as explosive as it sounds? Who knows? They're in shorts. The camp environment, especially in 7-on-7s, which a lot of reporters, like a lot of the live tweets you see, might not necessarily differentiate between 7-on-7. So unless you were online looking at, is this a 7-on-7 drill or not, you might not know. And 7-on-7 disadvantages the defense a lot, especially the cornerbacks. Like, cornerbacks in 1-on-1 are at a huge disadvantage compared to cornerbacks in an actual real game situation. And it's just one of those adjustments you have to make. So I don't know. But it's nice to see the offense do well. It's nice to see the offense do well in situational drills. Even the second team did, as led by Kellen Mond. Seemed like they were having a pretty good 2-minute drill. The practice ended before the 2-minute drill ended. So that sucks. We didn't get to see it end, but whatever. So yeah. I don't know. Seems like the offense is doing pretty well, but we'll have to. I want to see it with my own eyes before I make any real big ones. But beyond that, you can't really extrapolate so much from camp, right? Like you're not going to know. You can maybe get some idea, and if they are really good, it would look like this. But there are worlds where they aren't very good, but they looked good in camp, and for whatever reason, it was just tricking us. R.C. Christensen asks, how accurate are Madden playbooks for the Vikings? So I think you're asking this, and if you're not, I'm going to mention it anyways. You might be asking this because of the whole plays getting leaked controversy, not even leaked, like videos of camp being posted and then people recognized what plays they are controversy. Few people on YouTube were very mad that I joined in on that, but I have no regrets. One, all the screenshots that I posted on YouTube in yesterday's episode, which I do recommend that you go watch, I think it's informative, were from a Sean McVay 2018 playbook or a Kyle Shanahan 2019 playbook. That was not Kevin O'Connell's plays. I mean, they're probably similar, but we knew that. We knew he was going to run McVay stuff. So there's nobody in the NFL watching my podcast that is learning anything that they didn't already know. I went in pretty far depth. Like, I went a lot further than what you would usually find on like ESPN, because I think that makes for a good fan experience. But that was still very much a fans conversation. If I went in and showed that to somebody in an NFL building, they'd be like, yeah, I learned that 19 years ago. So I wanted to get that out of the way. But to R.C. Christensen's question, Madden playbooks are just really, really dumbed down versions. They're just way, way simplified. The kind of recipe cookbook version of a Michelin dish, that kind of deal. There are, in NFL playbooks, there are a lot more choices and options. In a Madden playbook, they don't really program AI to do that. If you're in Madden, if you're running a post route, you're running a post route. But a post route in an NFL playbook has stuff like break to daylight in it, where Madden is just a 45-degree angle. It has stuff like, there's an 18-yard and then break or a 15-yard and then break, and that can be a decision depending on how the safety's aligned. Not to mention just straight up options that are just in all of, like, just, break against the cornerback's leverage, that kind of stuff. There's a lot more fluidity to an NFL playbook than there is to a Madden playbook because they just can't like code all of those if thens. And that's just not going to be clean, right? So that's going to be the difference between NFL and like the Vikings and the Vikings on Madden. John Hunter asks, Vikings fan from Scotland who was lucky enough to get London tickets. As it'll be my first live game, is there anything I need to look out for that I wouldn't usually see on TV? Any tips for live watching to get the best experience? Okay, if you're at the game, that's where you can see the safeties that you oftentimes cannot see on the broadcast, and you can see a lot of interesting things going on there. You can see when guys are streaking open, but the quarterback didn't find them. You can see who's getting doubled a lot. You can see what sort of defenses. I don't think you have to familiarize yourself with like what like 7 Bronco is or any of that stuff. But I mean, whatever you have, you should be able to apply. But I say watch that. Watch how often there's 1 deep safety versus 2 deep safeties to line up. I like just the safeties themselves can show you so much about a defense. And it'll be the Saints, right? So Dennis Allen's defense and our defense, I think they're very different. If I don't know Dennis Allen that well, but I'm pretty sure they're like pretty different. So watching how they use the safeties will tell you a lot about what the idea behind the defenses are. Jimmy Bergeson asks, we are going to our first training camp next Monday, August 8th. Is there anything in particular we should know about or try to get to? How does the autograph session work when the Vikings website describes them as team autographs? My son and I are hoping to get our jerseys signed. So I think the Vikings website describes that because I don't know if they know who's going to be there. Or they haven't announced at least who's going to be there. So I don't know whose autograph you're going to get, but there's a line right next to the actual TCO field. So the TCO site has the field, which is where like kids can run around. So I don't know how old your son is, but if your son's young enough where you want to run him around a little bit before practice, you can have him run 40s. There's like cornhole out there. There's all kinds of really fun stuff to play. So you can do a lot, like get there a couple hours early, I think, and run around and play and have a good time. And then your kid will be real tired when it's time to sit down and watch practice. I think that's why they do. That's the key. And then for the autographs, so right by the actual practice field, like between the practice field and the kids running around field where you may have seen like soccer games or where they'll do like the night practice. Monday is the night practice, I'm pretty sure. So they'll clear that out maybe, I guess. Anyways, the autographs are there. You'll see a line. Just get in the line and wait. I have a ton more questions to get to, so I will get to them. But first, let me talk to you about Built Bar. It's the best tasting protein bar on the planet. Built Bar is low calorie, low sugar, low fat, and chock full of collagen protein, which your body is better at absorbing than other proteins. And now they are introducing their cookie dough chunk puffs. They've got this light, chewy, that marshmallowy texture that you get in any Built Bar puff, and then it's got cookie dough chunks in it. And need I remind you, 15 grams of protein, 160 calories, and it's a cookie dough marshmallow bar covered in 100% chocolate. Need I say more? So head on over to built.com and enter promo code LOCKED15, that's LOCKED15, to get 15% off of your order. It's promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, you should go check out the Minnesota Football Party. It's an ensemble podcast with me and Arif Hassan and Luke Inman and Sam Ekstrom. We talked a little Kirk Cousins, a little bit of Dalvin Cook's value, and some disappointing O-line draft picks from over the years. Really fun. I also would love it if you went to patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL and you saw the first episode of my history doc. Episodes of that's the history of the Minnesota Vikings, like a whole comprehensive thing on the whole history. And it is a 7-part series, one coming out every Saturday. First part's already out. And if you subscribe to me on Patreon, if you join me there, then it is every Friday. You get everything a day early. Or it's just like a tip jar. If you find value in everything that I do and you want to support me, I would greatly appreciate it. Moving on with this Twitter Tuesday mailbag. The next one comes from Scolger, who asks, with the transition to 3-4, which D-line are lined up at what positions in training camp? Okay, so I'm going to assume Scolger is new because we've talked about this a whole bunch. So sorry if you have been listening all summer and this is repetitive, but for people like Scolger, or if you're not new, people who just haven't heard this, so basically you are going to have Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith. I'm going to call them rover positions. We would think of them, like if you lined them up in Madden, they would be outside linebackers in a 3-4, those kind of, the Von Miller thing. But they're going to rove around the formation. They're not just going to line up on the edges and be edge rushers. You're going to get Zadarius Smith on guards a lot. You're going to get Danielle Hunter moving around a lot. They're moving all over the formation. And on the inside, you have Dalvin Tomlinson and Harrison Phillips and Armon Watts. That's your base. Your linebackers are Kendricks and Jordan Hicks. Armon Watts comes out if you need an extra linebacker like an Asamoah or a nickel defensive back. And we'll talk more about what that nickel is in a moment. But the next question comes from Zachary Hayes, who asks, do you think it's possible for Cam and Booth to start at one point with Pat P being the third guy? If Patrick Peterson plays as well as he did last year, or even close to as well as he did last year, I don't think either of those guys will overtake him. He was a good corner last year. And if he can repeat that, then he can start and we should all be happy about it. But if age catches up to him and he totally sucks, then that is probably what it would take. It does seem like Booth is having some pretty good moments. It seems like Dantzler's having his ups and his downs, which is not what you want in a cornerback, but at least there are ups that are going with the downs. It's a very interesting camp that those guys are having. I would not bet on it, but if Patrick Peterson falls apart or, has injury problems or something, then that probably would be the avenue to seeing that. Mitchell Dykstra asks, what are your thoughts on the Kyle Hamilton video? I assume you're talking about, so there is a video from Ravens training camp, which, by the way, Ravens live stream all 22 of all of their camp practices. So you can pound sand about teams worrying about they're not practicing the plays that they want to keep secret at these. The fans are everywhere. Anyone can walk in. Anyone can see the clips. Pound sand. But the Ravens had a drill of Kyle Hamilton losing to some random tight end or something, somebody on, I think a third teamer of theirs, maybe a second teamer of theirs. Definitely not somebody who is projected to be a starter. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ravens fans. Just cooking Kyle Hamilton out of the slot. He was not a man coverage guy. So that lines up with his draft evaluation. And that's not what you would typically ask him to do. And that might be a reason why the Vikings didn't have him that much higher than Lewis Cine, or maybe not even higher than Lewis Cine at all. That would explain it, right? Because they're looking for somebody with more versatility, and that's what Cine has. Now, I didn't really agree with that. I thought his man coverage skills would be fine, but also I think it was either a 7-on-7 or a 1-on-1 drill where defensive backs are at a huge disadvantage. So definitely not the thing to hinge your Kyle Hamilton evaluation on. It was a bad rep from a rookie. Those will happen. Get him out now, if you ask me. JB asks, keep hearing JJ in the Cooper Kupp role, but Kupp is a different kind of animal than JJ, different brand of physicality. Wouldn't Irv Smith be the more logical option in that role, and then keep JJ doing JJ things, keep Thielen doing Thielen things? So you're onto something there with that. It's a blocking role, and are we really going to ask Justin Jefferson to block a lot, and run blocking and stuff? Are we really going to risk his body that way? And I think the answer for the Vikings will be yes, that's okay for them, and Justin Jefferson's a good blocker, so that's fine. But I think the problem with that is if you have Irv Smith in the Cooper Kupp role, then the defense has a linebacker to match up with Irv Smith. And what you want is the defense to bring out a dime cornerback and to be able to run on that because of how good your wide receivers are at blocking. That's the point of the Cooper Kupp role. So if anybody, that's why I've been saying KJ Osborne. Another defensive back will match KJ Osborne in terms of personnel packaging. They see Osborne come into the huddle, that's a defensive back. But I think he can do the blocking that Cooper Kupp did, and I think he can be a little bit more of a versatile piece for that particular role, and then that can spring, and then Justin Jefferson can reap all the benefits in the way that Cooper Kupp reaped the benefits of his own work. Justin Jefferson can reap the benefits of KJ Osborne's work, and KJ Osborne can reap some too. He's having an awesome camp, and he seems like he's going to be pretty good again this year. Caden Fedler asks, last year KJ surprised us all by contributing at a high level after a shaky rookie season. What are the chances it happens again this year? Oh, you're talking about another rookie. Probably not. It seems like there's a decent shot that Kellen Mond wins the backup quarterback job. I would be very happy with that. I think if you spent a third round pick on a backup quarterback, I think that is a good price for that. I think that's a fair and even exchange of resources. It's not a steal, but it's not a disappointment or anything. I think that's right on the money. So I would be happy with that. Seems like the ship has sailed on Wyatt Davis. I don't think Chaz Surratt has much of a shot. Maybe Patrick Jones? Zach Davidson got some run with the ones when, that was the other thing. Irv Smith left the practice on Monday. Came back without a helmet, but in full pads and did only limited work, it sounds like. So that's a situation to monitor. But with the ones in his stead, it was a little Johnny Munt and a little bit of Zach Davidson, and Zach Davidson actually had a good day. So maybe it's him. Maybe he's the one having a pretty good one. The chances are low. It doesn't seem like anybody's really making a huge push. Like by this point last year, KJ Osborne had already kind of blown us all away, and Zach Davidson has had like 3 good plays in camp. Lucas asks, NFL Stock Exchange did an expansion franchise. They protected 4 players from each side of the ball. Who would you protect on the Vikings? Okay. This is a fun one, but if you know me, I only ever do 3. So my 3, Justin Jefferson, easy. I think it has to be Kirk Cousins, right? Like if an expansion team's they're never ever gonna get any quarterback that's better than Kirk Cousins is getting protected, right? So if I don't protect Kirk Cousins, I'm absolutely losing Kirk Cousins, and I don't think my team can handle that. But it also depends on how the contract would work with that. Like if we eat a bunch of dead money, I'm 100%. Losing or keeping Kirk Cousins, like I'm protecting Kirk. But if they take the whole contract, I could think about it more, but I still probably wouldn't do it. So Jefferson, Cousins, and then probably a tackle. So we'll go Brian O'Neill. Jefferson, Cousins, Brian O'Neill. Those are my 3 on the front end. And then on the defense, Eric Kendricks, Danielle Hunter. Those are easy for me. And then I'll go with Harrison Smith. Seem to be kind of the linchpins of the defense, and they have been for a long time. Even though Harrison Smith is old, I think he's a lot more important to the defense than people give him credit for, just because people still are under the weird impression that safeties don't matter, which is very dumb. East Coast Vikings fan asks, would Mike Zimmer still be the head coach if the Vikings had drafted Aaron Donald in 2014 instead of Barr? No. I think the problems with Mike Zimmer that got him fired last year went way beyond just like... And Anthony Barr had a fine year, and I don't think Anthony Barr was a discipline. I think Anthony Barr was a very, very good player. Aaron Donald would have been better. Absolutely. Aaron Donald's Aaron Donald. He's one of the greatest defensive players to ever grace the game. But I don't think that would have been enough to save Mike Zimmer's job. There's just a lot more going on there that he was probably cooked even if the roster was really good. Skull Actuary says, what's the process for team transactions such as contracts, waivers, and roster movement? To see teams submit documentation to the NFL, and how does that get reviewed? So the answer to this is the union does a lot of the reviewing. So the player and his agent will negotiate a contract with the team, and they will come to an agreement, whatever the contract terms are, and then that will get sent to the NFLPA to review to make sure that it's within all the terms. And the NFLPA is like the union is the one actually enforcing the salary cap, and making sure that it's compliant with all that it's compliant with league rules. And then I'm pretty sure there's somebody at the league office that also like processes it. But if there's anything against the rules, it's watchdogs at the union who I think are really responsible for making sure that it's up to code and that the player's not getting screwed in any way. Theo asks, can you talk about the difference between a QB's right and left foot being in front in shotgun? Looks like Kirk has gone from his left foot being back to his right. So first, unbelievable catch here, Theo. Good eye. Damn. It does look like he's switched his stance from one foot to the other. My understanding is that that's a tempo thing, and that might be a difference between the Kubiak offenses and the O'Connell offense. It's sort of arbitrary. I don't know if there's necessarily an advantage, but there's a lot of rhythm to passing, especially to quick game, and you're taught like a tempo. So it'll be like bump, bump, bump. Like that's your feet should kind of step, step, step. Bump, bump, bump. And they'll even give you a song. Like it should be literally musical, like it's rhythmic. And maybe now it's bump, 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 bump. And that's it. Like that's the difference, is the quick game is on a different tempo. And so he'll switch his footwork that way. I don't think it changes the throwing mechanic at all. It's just like a timing thing, because now it requires like one extra step before he does his drop back. Stezo asks, Tevin Jenkins for Wyatt Davis. Who says no? Probably the Bears. It seems like Tevin Jenkins is real. So for context, the Bears are shopping Tevin Jenkins right now, according to Ian Rappaport, which is incredible. He's a second-year player, second-round pick. And a lot of people had him on the exact same plane with Christian Darrisaw. I had him there, and I actually preferred him to Christian Darrisaw, which, yikes. And also, it sounds like Christian Darrisaw's having a pretty good start to camp as well. So nice. But yeah, it's rough over there in Chicago. But it sounds like they're probably going to want like a second or a third round pick. And right now, Wyatt Davis, who might not even be a rosterable player, we're in conditional seventh range for him. So the Bears, unfortunately. Ryan asks, okay, forget big nickel. What's the most interesting or incoherently wacky thing that you would be excited to see with these new systems players? I will say it from the rooftops until the day I die. Brian O'Neill, tight end package. Give me a Brian O'Neill, big man, 6'0", and he goes out. Number 75 is eligible, and he runs a little stick route and catches a touchdown. He did it at Pitt. He took a reverse to the house. He is awesome at that. Give me the Brian O'Neill package, damn it. The people demand this, and as we all know, NFL teams are a democracy. MN Hopes asks, with the Donatell defense not requiring as much of linebackers historically, what could this reduced complexity / role allow Kendricks or Hicks to do that they didn't do previously? It's just going to be a volume game, I think. So when I say that, I mean like that job is a lot of read and react, see ball, get ball. And it is a job that I think Eric Kendricks can do very, very naturally and without a lot of like development or getting used to it. I think he will be instantly very good at that job because it's just not the most demanding role. It's physically demanding, and yeah, you have to be able to read and react, but that's easy mode for Eric Kendricks. And when you take a great player and you put him on easy mode, that's when some of the great things can happen. I'm not saying this is exactly the same, but think about when quarterbacks got to Minnesota and all they had to do was throw deep to Randy Moss. Suddenly they all had career years. Like it's easy mode, right? A quarterback, or like when Brett Favre got to Minnesota, part of it was, in Green Bay and with the Jets, he had to do everything because those rosters were like bad. And then he got to Minnesota where they had a great offensive line and they had Adrian Peterson. And he kind of like, there were games Adrian Peterson just won in 2009. He would just like rip off 3 touchdowns and they would just like win for free. And Brett Favre didn't have to do anything. And when there's that much less pressure on him, he could, it's like take Tony Hawk and ask him to do one ollie. Like he'll do it 1,000 times in a row. Right. So that's, and I think it'll be a volume game too, because what you have to do is as the one in a 5-1 front, like what I think Hendricks will be, is you have to tackle. And so I think if he can be a sound tackler, he will rack up 10 million tackles. Draft Eric Kendricks in your IDP leagues. Eric the Red asks, have you ever been happy that the Bears or Packers won a football game besides when they play each other? So the only time I could think of for this was when it's like a playoff thing. So I think of 2000 season, week 17, the Vikings need a win or a Tampa Bay loss to win the division, and Tampa Bay was playing Green Bay. Green Bay won that game. And I remember actually as a kid being like the Battle of the Bays and thinking that was really fun and being very happy that the Green Bay Packers won, thus clinching us the division, that kind of thing. But never outside of a situation where it like created something good for the Vikings, like a division title or playoff position or a loss for a greater divisional opponent. Ross asks, what's an under-the-radar player you could see making a bigger impact than expected? I said one earlier, and I forgot who it was. So whatever I said earlier, that was like, I think he could be like underrated good. But I will say, Dalvin Cook. I think people are getting so hard into the running backs don't matter thing, and they think you could just replace Dalvin Cook with some random replacement player dude. On the Minnesota Football Party, Arif Hassan said he could replace him with Alexander Mattison. I have vehemently fought against that for a long time. I got articles about that, so I obviously disagree with that. So I think Dalvin Cook will, and I think he'll get more involved in like downfield passing. A lot of the reason running back passing isn't as valuable is because a lot of times it's like checkdowns. But having a guy as your check down who can make someone miss and turn a, oh my God, pressure check down situation into a 13-yard gain, I think that's really valuable. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I think he will have more impact than we're giving him credit for just because he's a running back that makes money. Ken Levin asks, do you think that Ed Donatell is going to utilize a 3-safety package a decent amount this upcoming season? Yes. They've already practiced it. That's going to be their, what somebody else called it the big nickel. That's what I think the big nickel is, which is your nickel back, but it's a third safety. Yes, that is going to be a thing. And I don't know if it's going to be Bynum with Cine rotating in or Cine with Bynum rotating in. The answer to that could change in the middle of the season too. But there will be times when both those guys and Harrison Smith are on the field. Especially against like 2 tight end sets and teams like, the 49ers are going to be like this. The Bears might be like this. So that kind of thing. Omar asks, you're starting a pop punk band with 3 or 4 Vikings players. Which 3 to 4 Vikings are you choosing to be on that band and why? So there are 3 Vikings that I know can sing. And so we're doing the trio thing. Andrew Booth, Blake Prohl, and Kirk Cousins. There you go. Stu asks, how are babies made? Okay, so you go to Amazon.com, and you go to Amazon.com, you enter the Konami code. If you don't know the Konami code, Google it. I'm not your dad. Once you enter the Konami code from Amazon, you will get an email telling you to meet a guy named Gary, and they will tell you where to meet, usually behind like a Dave's Hot Chicken or something like that. You go there, you bring $1,000 cashier's check, and you give it to him. He'll be in the raincoat, and he will give you a certificate. You take that certificate to the DMV, and there you go. You get your baby. And if you don't like your baby, you can return it later, but it takes 8 to 10 business days for the shipping and all of that. And it's really a big hassle. And I just recommend, get what you get. It's a baby. You'll be fine. Brandon Fisher asks, I'm really liking the direction the team is headed. Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell seem to have a very clear, focused direction that they want to take the team. I like the offensive and defensive systems being put in place. Why? As a Vikings fan, am I dumb enough to allow hope back into my heart? My answer to this, if you are not dumb enough to let hope back into your heart, then your fandom has died and you need to resurrect it. This is the point. It's July. It's August. I've been so, a Kirk Cousins hater, as I've said many times on this show, am releasing a podcast that probably is titled something like Kirk Cousins is shredding at camp or something like that. Like, it's optimism season. Get wrapped up in it. They can't hurt you for like 4 more weeks. Have fun for now. And then when the season comes in, temper your expectations or whatever. Make yourself do your defensive pessimism thing if you have to. But for now, damn, have a good time. It's a good time, all right? We're going to keep having good times here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Tomorrow, I'm going to see, there's some cool guests I'm trying to line up. We've got all kinds of camp things to do. I've got position battles to go over. We got a ton of stuff to cram in and talk about. So we're going to do that. In the meantime, check out my history documentary. Link to all that stuff is in the show notes. I would love it if you watched part 2, which is the first part of the 1970s. You get to learn about Paul Krause and Alan Page and like Wally Hilgenberg and Roy Winston and maybe some guys you haven't heard a lot about. Big giant Joe Cat feature in it. Very excited. And then, of course, the first time they go to the Super Bowl as well. So go check that out. Check out the Minnesota Football Party. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.